What's up, YouTube? My name is Caden and you're watching Gas at Garage. Today we are back working on my long neglected Predator 670 powered custom built Yerf dog buggy. In today's video we're going to be putting front brakes on this thing, and I am going to be doing a stage 2 build on the engine for more power. We're going to be deleting the governor, putting in some 50-pound valve springs. I'm going to put on a 34mm flat slide carb with a custom intake manifold, and then we're also going to be doing billet rods and a billet flywheel on this thing. And it should go a lot faster and probably have some more horsepower as well. And front brakes are really going to help this thing stop a lot better, because currently it just has one very small rear brake that doesn't work very well. It's been quite a while since I've worked on this thing, so I think it's time to haul it back out again and kind of clean it up and give it some more awesome mods. So enjoy the video. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get started by just kind of cleaning this thing off a little bit, getting all the dust and leaves and stuff off of it, and pumping up the tires and bringing this thing into the garage. And I'm gonna get started by putting the front brakes on this thing, because I'm still waiting on a couple of parts to get here for the engine. So for right now, let's go ahead and clean it up and roll it into the garage. All right, so it's actually about 2 weeks later, and I kind of forgot to film it, but we got this thing in the garage now, and I've got it all cleaned up, or at least for the most part, to where all of the dirt and leaves and stuff are off of it. It still is pretty dirty and rusty and kind of nasty and crusty, but it's in the garage, so now we can go ahead and get started on this thing. So like I said, first we're going to go ahead and start by putting the front brakes on this thing. So let's get this front end jacked up and get the wheels off and start building some mounts for the front brake kit that I bought. All right, so I've got the front wheels off and I've got the go-kart up in the air, and I noticed that the brake lines for the front calipers here are actually a little bit too short for the width of this front end. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna run this over kind of right here off center a little bit, so this one will reach. And then for this one, it's definitely too short, but I do have this longer brake line from this old brake system off of another project. So what I'm going to do is, even though this system is already bled, it kind of sucks that I have to do this, but I'm going to depressurize the system by removing this brake line and replacing it with this one. So I will have to rebleed these brakes, which with two calipers is kind of going to be a pain, but it is what it is. I really don't have any other choice with this. So before I do that, I'm actually going to make the mounts first. So what I'm going to do is, since this caliper is the exact same design as this one, I'm just going to use this as a mock-up and put it right here just to make the mount and get it in the right position. And then I'll also go ahead and mount that one. And then after that, we will put the new brake line on, and then I'll mount the calipers, and then I'll also mount the front brake lever up there. And this is actually for like a little Chinese ATV, like a little 110, 125 four-wheeler, which is why it has the hand brake lever right there. But I'm just going to make a little mount for it, so it'll be right in front of the steering wheel. And what that's going to do is it's going to really simplify this whole mechanism, so I won't have to run that thing into my existing brake pedal. It's just going to make it a lot easier and a lot more simple. So let's go ahead and get this one mounted, get the other one mounted and the handle mounted, and then I will replace the brake line. And then, all right, so I made these two brackets off camera to mount the brake calipers. So let's go ahead and get these lined up and weld them on. All right, guys, so I think this front end with the brakes is pretty much done. I got it bled off camera. Now it was bled when I got the brake kit, but since we had to put in this longer brake cable right here, or brake line, to be able to reach this side, it lost pressure when I did that, so I had to re-bleed the system. And I did that off camera just because it's kind of boring and it takes quite a while. And it's still not perfect. There's not a ridiculous amount of pressure on this, but you can feel something. And I think it should, in combination with the rear brakes, which I actually still have to bleed, stop this thing pretty well. So this front end is completely done for right now. So I think we can go ahead and move on to building the engine back here. We're going to be getting rid of this whole crazy throttle linkage right here along with the governor. And then I'm also going to be getting rid of this stock carburetor on here. And I'm going to build a custom intake manifold, like a one that splits into two, for a single barrel 34 millimeter flat slide carburetor that I have. So I'm going to put that on there. And then I'm also going to put in some 50-pound valve springs in both heads. And we're also going to be putting in some billet aluminum connecting rods from Performance 670. They have a whole bunch of stuff for these engines, so I'll link their website in the description, so be sure to go check them out. I am still waiting on a flywheel to get back in stock so I can actually order it, because they've been out of stock for flywheels for quite a while. So I'm going to go ahead and build this without a billet flywheel. I know I shouldn't, but I'm going to just send it anyway, and I'll try not to rev it too high because I don't want to blow up that flywheel. So I probably will get one of those little digital tachometers from Amazon that you can get so I can see what my RPM is so I don't over rev that stock flywheel. So for right now, let's go ahead and disconnect this fuel line and start taking off this carburetor and exhaust and CVT and everything, because I'm actually going to try and do this without removing the engine from this frame, because let me tell you, this thing is a pain to get out of here. So let's go ahead and start taking this thing apart and drain the oil and try and start working on the intake side before we get into the internals. I used the old intake spacer as a template to cut out the flange for my new custom one that I'm building. So we have our pretty much finished intake manifold right here. I haven't painted it yet, but I'll probably do that later. I just want to kind of get it on the engine right now. It's a little janky looking, but I think it'll work for our purposes here. And then I've also got these two gaskets cut out. I did these off camera just because they kind of took a while to get right. And then we have our intake boot that will bolt on right here like that. So I'm gonna grab some bolts, bolt this on, and then we can put our carburetor on this and then bolt this onto the intake of the engine, and then our carburetor and intake setup will be pretty much done, other than painting this later and putting an air filter on here and getting a throttle cable, which I still have to order. So let's go ahead and do this, and then we'll probably move on to doing the billet rods and valve springs. All right, so the intake on this thing is basically done. I'm still waiting on the air filter and throttle cable to get here from Amazon, but in the meantime, let's go ahead and get these valve covers off and do the valve springs on this thing. I am gonna try and do it without removing the engine and without removing the heads on this thing. And there is a cool trick that I can use to do that. And that is removing the spark plug and shoving a whole bunch of rope inside of the cylinder. And when you rotate the piston to top dead center, it will compress all that rope and hold the valves up pretty well, I think. So that will allow me to hopefully be able to compress the valve springs to get the keepers in without having to remove the head. So we're putting 50-pound valve springs in this thing that are actually from a Predator 420, because I looked it up and 670s and 420s made by Predator both use the exact same size valve springs. So I just ordered 2 sets of 50-pound Predator 420 valve springs for this thing, which was significantly cheaper than the $150 valve springs from Performance 670, because the ones I got on Amazon I think came out to a total of like 20 bucks, which is significantly better. So let's go ahead and get these valve covers off and get the spark plugs out, fill the cylinders with a rope, and try and do this without taking the heads off. So I'm doing these valve springs, and I had to make my own valve spring compressor to grab the frame right here. And I think this is the jankiest valve spring compressor setup known to man. This is like, if I touch it, it's gonna fall off. So I'm having to be very, very delicate with this. And I basically have this tube that has a big slot cut in it because I had cut out a piece for another project. And I tacked on a flat plate on either end. And then I used another piece of much smaller tubing right here for the little thing so I could get in there with a magnet to put the keepers in. And it's working, but it's very, very delicate and very janky. So basically the clamp is grabbing this bar and pushing this down, which is pushing the valve spring down. So this is working, but it's a little sketchy and just very jerry-rigged together. All right, so it's the next day and I finally got these 50-pound valve springs in because I was really having a hard time getting the little keepers in on top of the valves, because I just had my makeshift valve spring compressor at an odd angle, and it was really making it difficult to get the keepers in there. But I finally got it, And I did put the rockers back on, but I haven't attached the push rods yet, and I also haven't adjusted the valve lash or tightened anything down yet, because I still do need to be able to rotate the engine and be able to take the side cover off and take the cam and everything out to be able to do the billet rods. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the 50-pound valve springs on this side off camera, just because it's the exact same process as this side. And then the next thing you're going to see, I'm going to do the billet rods. So I'm going to have to drain the oil and then take the side cover off. Hopefully I can save the gasket, but if not, I do have gasket maker. And then we're going to remove the cam, and I'm going to try and do the rods by pressing the pistons down just enough to where I can get the wrist pins out, and hopefully the rings don't pop out. If the rings end up popping out, then I will have to pull the engine and take the heads off, but I'm going to try not to do that. I'm going to be as delicate and careful with this as I possibly can to try and do this without taking the heads off. So let's go ahead and do those off camera, and then I will do the billet rods. All right, I realized in order to pull the rods out, I have to pull the crankshaft out. And in order to pull the crankshaft out, I have to pull the flywheel off. So let's take this cover off. And thankfully, I already have a tool to pop that flywheel off. So let's get that off so we can get the crankshaft out so we can get the rods replaced. So I did have to take off one of the cylinder heads in order to take out one of the rod and piston assemblies, because the crankshaft wouldn't come out of the block with both rods still in position. So I had to remove one of them in order to get the crankshaft out. So right here, I am prepping the billet connecting rods by inserting the bearings into them, and also just going over them and making sure that there's no burrs from machining, and also cleaning them with a little bit of brake cleaner to make sure there's no dirt or debris on them before assembly. And then I also checked the oil clearances on the crankshaft journal with some plastic gauge off camera. I didn't film it, but I did go ahead and put the other connecting rod on the other piston, and here I'm putting it back in the cylinder with my ring compressor. And yes, in case you're wondering, I did oil everything before I put it all back together. And in case you're wondering, the torque spec for the billet rods is 20 foot-pounds. And I torqued the head bolts to 23 foot-pounds. So the easiest way to remove the governor on these V-twins is you take the side cover and clamp it in a vise like this, and then there is a small pin that holds in the governor gear, and you can just use a punch and a hammer to tap it out from the other side, and then you tap the hole and then put a small bolt in that hole with a lot of Loctite. And be sure to clean out all of the metal shavings from the hole with brake clean before you put the bolt in. And I decided to put the bolt on the inside of the side cover because if I put it on the outside, the CVT backing plate will no longer be able to fit properly. So for the side cover gasket, I basically just used a whole bunch of ultra black gasket maker along with the remnants of the old side cover gasket, and I think I used enough of it, so hopefully we won't have any oil leaks. I torqued the side cover bolts to 17 foot-pounds. All right, so I know I haven't been explaining a whole lot of what I'm doing other than the voiceovers, but I've basically got everything on the internals of this engine pretty much done. I've removed the governor, and I actually left the governor shaft in here, which is this thing right here, but I cut the little arm off of the end of it so it won't be turning around or hitting anything. So the shaft is still in its stock position, which isn't running into anything in the engine, but I was able to remove the governor and tap that hole, like I said in the voiceover, and put a bolt in it. So now I've also got these other 50-pound valve springs in this side, along with the push rods and rockers. So all I have left to do is tighten down the bolts right here on both sides and set the valve lash, and then we can get the valve covers back on and put the flywheel back on, and we should be pretty much done, other than just putting the CVT back on and like inflating the tires and stuff. And then I also have to put a throttle cable on here, but it's still not here yet. So let's go ahead and set the valve lash, do the flywheel, and put the rest of this back together. I torqued the flywheel bolt to 54 foot-pounds. right, so this engine build is pretty much done. So the last thing we have left to do, now that it's filled with oil and everything, is hook up a new throttle cable, because the old one I have on here, for one, isn't long enough, and two, it's the wrong type of cable end. So we're going to put this new one on here, and I also have a digital tachometer to install on this thing. So let's do those things, and then we can go ahead and give this thing a test start. All right, so we just got the throttle cable put in on this thing, and I had to drill a new hole in the pedal to get the proper leverage to pull it all the way. And even still, when I push the pedal all the way to where that spring right there bottoms out, it still isn't full throttle. But I think that's a good thing on this, because I don't have a billet flywheel and I don't want to go full throttle and blow this thing up. But once we get a billet flywheel and some stronger rockers for the valves, then I will adjust this thing so we can go full throttle in this thing. But for right now, we've got the tachometer installed right there. I haven't really looked at the directions on how to use it yet, but I'll worry about that later. So for right now, let's go ahead and give this thing a test start. All right, so I've got the chain disconnected just in case this thing is idled too high or whatever. I don't want this thing running away on me. So I'm gonna see if it'll start with just the battery that's on here, because it does still have 12 volts. I checked it with a multimeter, but it's been sitting for a while, so I don't know if it has enough cranking amps. Surprisingly, it does. I still might connect the jumper box later, but... Sounds like it's got a little bit more oomph to those pops. Also sounds a little bit rich. Runs good. Runs real good. Nice. All right. So I think that's going to be it for today's video, guys. I know it's a little bit of a longer one, but we got a lot done in this video. We got the front brakes done, and they work, surprisingly. We've got this engine fully built. We got 50-pound valve springs in it, a 34mm carburetor with a custom intake manifold, and we got billet rods from Performance 670 in this thing. Again, the link's in the description for the billet rods. So I think now, since Mini Mayhem is actually tomorrow, we got to go load this thing up in the trailer, and I got to give it a once over, make sure everything is lubricated properly with all the chains and bearings and steering and everything and suspension. But I think this thing is pretty much good to go. I didn't look at the tachometer to see what RPM we were getting. I kind of forgot about it, but this thing sounds awesome, and yeah, I think we are good to go. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment as always, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.